Thank you. I beg your pardon for my voice. It's not in the best shape. I hope I am audible. I thank the organizers. Uh, Obviously, we are having it again after 2-3 years, right? It's nice to have this annual meeting. Now, what I will talk about is role of entropy in charged polymers. So we'll look at different systems, and we'll see. Well, when you discuss about entropy, of course, the energy also will come into play because in statistical mechanics, as we know, it's mostly balanced between the two. Pardon. Now, if we look at at the simplest system, we have this single polymer chain and the counter ions. It's a charged polymer. Now, we can immediately think of three major contributions from entropy. One is the free ion entropy, which is the most prominent, as we know. And then the configurational entropy, which is maximum when the chain is Gaussian. And now the free ion entropy can be two types: completely free ions in the solutions, and entropy of the condensed ions, which are close to the chain backbone, not necessarily condensed to only one of the monomers. It can slide along the chain backbone. Now, why I'm differentiating these two, we'll see later when we talk about complexation in the system. Complexation means when two oppositely charged polyions come into picture. Now, so these are pretty standard results. What people see for that kind of a single chain system, if you increase the Beram length, we know the Beram length is the competition between the thermal energy and electrostatic energy between two elementary charges. The length scale that determines that is the length, Beram length. If you increase the Beram length, that means the Coulomb strength, the effective electrostatics. In the system, one can see there is condensation of polymer, condensation of counterions on the polymer, and the charge goes down. Charge goes down means the bare charge of the polymer goes down, accordingly the size in the condensation regime. But there is some non-monotonicity which is well known. I'll not discuss it here, but this range we can call it to be the bare charge electrostatic regime, and this is the condensation regime. When the size of the chain goes down, because the overall charge goes down with condensed counterions, and the repulsion between the ions, between the monomers, charged monomers, that also goes down. So this is a standard free energy which people have been using for long, basically based on Edwards Hamiltonian, and which takes care of the free counterions and the condensed counterions. I'm not going into the details. This is the system along with the salt. You can have external salt in the system, where the counterion, where the positive, if the chain is negatively charged, the positive ion from the salt can be taken as counterion of the, can be equated, taken as the same as the counterion of the polymer. Or it can be different also. There is some combinatorial calculation that comes up. Now, the first thing we in our group we looked at is the collapse and expansion of a single polymer chain, charged polymer chain, and people had done several experiments. Especially people studied this system in the context of protein folding at one point of time, when the specificity of the proteins were not into picture at that time. They just wanted to understand the basics of the system. If there is a charge, there is charge in the system, how the charge plays the role of affecting the collapse or expansion. And there had been simulations. What we actually did, we considered that polymer change encapsulated in a volume. We considered the counterions, which I haven't drawn here. We wrote kind of a kinetic equation. Here, I did not explain this. L1 tilde is basically square root of the size Rg of the chain. And you can see the time. So size and time related. It's a kinetic equation. We took the free energy of the chain, which I had shown before, and we could come to this at low salt. We could come to this expression. The kinetic equation, you can see this is dl dt. So d is d size dt actually. So there are three different contributions we could see. One is the configurational entropy contribution of the polymer chain, and you have this excluded volume which can incorporate the the attractive interaction of the monomers as well, hydrophobicity encapsulated within the excluded volume parameter, three-body term to protect this, theoretically protect the collapse, complete collapse, and there is this charge-charge interaction. And then we could look at we could actually separate out these terms, this charge-charge interaction that actually gives us the swelling. We could take only this term and could have an analytical expression, this size dependency over time. We could figure it out. And then when it collapses because of, we could physically argue that it collapses because of the configurational entropy. For example, you swell this chain, start with a swelled configuration, and then you say the equilibrium, you create a situation where the equilibrium configuration is like close to Gaussian, then it will collapse. It will collapse because of the configurational entropy. Physically argued that, and then we only took this term and we could match. So what we are actually matching here is a full numerical solution with the analytical solution, which we obtained from just taking one of these terms. And there is obviously the collapse, the excluded volume or reverse excluded volume. Well, attractive interaction between the monomers should be responsible for that, and we took only this term. We could see this kind of matching in the system. So then, very recently, well, we've been working this for more than a year, almost 2 years now. So this two oppositely charged polyelectrolytes we looked at, and the role of entropy of the ions here. And here you can see, so the main questions people have, this is a very popular topic in charged polyelectrolyte physics and chemistry. Very popular topic because people want to know what actually drives this kind of association of two oppositely charged polymers. Now, it looks obvious, apparent, that possibly the electrostatic attraction between the opposite charges on the backbones of the monomers, but it turns out that the free ion, when they associate, when this is the separated state, and when they actually combine the associate complex, at that time the ions get released, and the ions, because of the release of the ions, there will be enormous entropy gain. And it turns out, as long as you work with this implicit solvent, as long as you ignore the solvent entropy, the orientation of the solvent molecules, these free ions actually, they drive this complexation process. The free energy is very similar to the previous one, just we had to incorporate two chains and take care of the entropies the way I had showed you in the second slide. And again, we had taken the uniform expansion model within the Edwards.
2 minutes are left.
Yeah, Edwards Hamiltonian. And what we could see for all these three colors are different Coulomb strengths. We could see the configurational entropy, the free energy due to the free ion entropy, released ions, F2 as we call it, that actually always gives you a gain. But in case of the enthalpy, we can see it can be a gain. It's a very, very small, modest gain at low Coulomb strength. At high Coulomb strength, actually, it's a loss. Why is it a loss? You can immediately see, because for higher Coulomb strengths, most of the ions will be condensed. So it starts with a lower Coulomb energy than it arrives at the end of the complexation, because you can see the overall number of ion pairs will reduce in that situation when it starts with many, a high number of condensed ions. That is the reason for the enthalpy loss during complexation. These were sort of well-known results for a long time, but we could actually give a two-chain, a model of two-chain complexation where we could see that, and we could look at the effect of salt and Coulomb. We plotted the entire thing as a function of the Coulomb strength, where finally we look at the free energy gain. Then you can extend it to asymmetric chains, which are the actual physical situation. There are several things happen depending on the asymmetry. When the chains are symmetric, the free energy gain is maximum, which is an obvious result, but we try to give a theoretical framework that can be used for other systems. And we look at the charge density asymmetry between two chains. chain length asymmetry between two chains, and we have talked about the enthalpic and entropic drive regimes. I looked at that based on the charge density. I'd stop here because the time is over.